What would you do if the person you loved told you you were no longer enough but still wanted to keep you? A year ago, my husband dropped a bombshell that shattered everything I thought I knew about marriage. What followed wasn't just betrayal. It was a revelation. And yesterday, I walked in on something that changed me forever. I always believed love was about choosing each other every single day, through the bad moods, the bills, the dull routines, through change. And God knows we changed, but I never thought we'd end up here. Him asking me to let go of our intimacy, but still, stay married. He didn't flinch when he told me. We were sitting at the kitchen table. The dishwasher was humming in the background. A normal Tuesday night. He looked across the table like he was about to read off a grocery list and said, "I think we should open the marriage." I blinked, thinking I misunderstood. "I love you," he added quickly. Jamie, when 24, young blonde, perfect skin. He looked like someone who lived at the gym and had never had a bad breakup. He shook my hand with the kind of confidence that made me feel invisible. Matthew looked at him. The way he used to look at me, like the sun, rose behind my eyes. I smiled. I nodded. I made tea. I didn't cry. At least not until they left. Over the weeks, Jamie became a fixture in Matthew's schedule. He'd go out on gym nights, movie nights, and wine tastings that weren't really wine tastings. I told myself. It didn't bother me. I told myself it was part of the deal. But every time I looked in the mirror, I saw someone fading. And then yesterday happened. It was just a normal lunch break. I wasn't supposed to be home. I was exhausted, and I thought I'd sneak in a quick nap. I pulled into the driveway, still on a conference call, still half thinking about invoices and deadlines. I opened the front door, and I froze. There, in our bedroom were Matthew and Jamie, together naked, tangled in each other. They didn't hear me. I stood there for a moment too long, then backed away and closed the door quietly. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I just left. I turned off my phone. I couldn't bear to hear whatever version of it's not, what it looks like. They had prepared. I drove for hours. I sat in a parking lot behind a movie theater and watched a film I don't remember. I didn't want to go home. Home didn't feel like home anymore. So didn't. I slept in the car, windows fogged, hoodie pulled over my head. This morning, I walked into the house like a ghost. Matthew and Jamie were at the kitchen table, like nothing happened. Jamie looked nervous. Matthew looked furious. "You scared me," he snapped. "You didn't come home. You turned off your phone. That's childish. Childish." The man who broke every part of me called me childish. I looked at him, really looked. And something shifted. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the fact that I had nothing left to lose. But I didn't feel fear anymore. I felt clarity. "You're right," I said. "This isn't working. I don't want this life. I don't want to be a placeholder in my own marriage." His face froze. "I want a divorce." He opened his mouth like he had something wise or tender to say, but nothing came out. You want to sleep with someone you're attracted to. I said, fine, marry them. But don't expect me to be okay with being your shadow. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said what needed to be said. He tried to pull me in to say I was overreacting, but I shook him off. This wasn't overreaction. This was revelation. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a woman taking her life back. I walked out the door again, but this time, it was different. This time I wasn't running away. I was walking towards something myself. I didn't pack a suitcase. I didn't have a plan. I just left. The morning after I asked for the divorce, I got in my car, drove down the freeway with no direction in mind, and kept driving until the city skyline disappeared in the rearview mirror. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't blast music or cry hysterically. It was quiet. Still. A kind of silence I hadn't known in years. I stopped at a small motel off the highway, one of those with faded curtains and vending machines from the 90s. The room smelled like old carpet and cigarettes, but it was mine. No Matthew, no memories, no expectations. I sat on the edge of the bed, stared at the wall, and let the weight of what I'd done sink in. For the first time in forever, I had no one to perform for that night. I slept harder than I had in months. No soft snoring next to me. No phantom worry about where he was or who he was texting. Just the hum of an old AC unit, and my breath, slow, steady feel. The next morning, I bought a cheap notebook from a gas station and started writing not poetry, not letters, just thoughts. What do I want? I stared at that question for almost 10 minutes before writing anything else, because honestly, I didn't know. For so long, I was Matthew's wife. I was the accommodating partner, the understanding woman who smiled through insults disguised as honesty. I was the one who stayed, who compromised, who made excuses. Who was I? Now I wrote down one word free and then another. Lost those two lived together in me, like stubborn roommates. I spent days alone in that tiny town, eating bad diner food and walking aimlessly down streets. I didn't know the names of, though. No one knew me there. No one looked at me with pity or judgment. I was invisible, and it was oddly comforting. Then on a rainy Thursday, I walked into a bookstore. It was small, tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop. The kind of place that still smelled like ink and paper. A bell chimed as I opened the door, and a middle-aged woman behind the counter smiled at me. Not a fake customer service smile. A warm, curious one. "You look like you're running from something," she said gently, not unkindly. I laughed. "Aren't we all?" She offered me tea and didn't ask more questions. I wandered the aisles, running my fingers over worn spines. I hadn't read for pleasure in years. Somehow, I ended up in the self-help section, staring at a book titled Reclaiming You. I bought it. That night back at the motel, I read until 3 a.m., and for the first time in a long time, I cried. But it wasn't the hollow, defeated cry I'd known. It was release, like something inside me cracked open, and what poured out wasn't weakness, but truth. I started making a plan, not a revenge plan, not a glow-up for the gram plan, a real one. A life plan. I didn't want to go back to being someone's afterthought. I didn't want to shrink myself to fit into a version of love that required me to disappear. I wanted to build a life where I didn't need to ask for space. I already had it. Within a week, I found a temporary apartment in the town. Nothing fancy, just a studio with creaky floors and a leaky faucet. But it was mine. I got a part-time job at the bookstore, just to have something to do with my hands. The owner, Lynn, never pried she let me shelve books, sip tea, and exist. And slowly, without even realizing it, I started to return to myself. I remembered that I used to paint, that I loved thunderstorms, that I always wanted to visit Oregon, that I hated the cologne Matthew wore, but never said anything, that I laughed too loud, loved too hard, and used to dream big. I started going to yoga, not for the workout, for the quiet. I joined a local women's group, just strangers sharing stories over wine and homemade cookies. One of them, a retired teacher named Carol, said something that stuck with me. Sometimes you don't need to be strong. You just need to be real. God, that hit me. I had been strong for so long, holding together a marriage that had no heartbeat, smiling through the sting of being called clinical, pretending I didn't mind watching my husband fall for someone else right in front of me. Now, I didn't have to be strong. I just had to be honest. One evening, while organizing books, I found an old journal tucked behind a stack. It wasn't for sale, just forgotten. The first page read, "To the woman I almost became. Thank you for letting me go." I stood there for a long time, holding it, my fingers trembling. It felt like a message, a blessing, a permission slip. I didn't call Matthew. I didn't check his social media. I didn't ask mutual friends what he was up to. I didn't need to. I wasn't hers anymore. I wasn't the woman who waited by the phone, who rationalized cruelty, who said I'm fine when I was breaking inside. I was someone else now, someone becoming. The funny thing about healing is that it doesn't happen in a straight line. There are days when you feel invincible, like you've finally crossed the mountain and left the pain in the valley behind. And then out of nowhere, something small, even stupid, knocks the wind out of you. A song, a smell, a memory. You didn't know you still had it for me. It was a voicemail. I was closing the bookstore. Late one Tuesday night. The kind of quiet evening where the air smells like wet pavement, and the only sound is the bell above the door jingling in the dark. I was locking up when my phone buzzed. A known number. I ignored it at first. But then it buzzed again. And again. Curious. I checked the voicemail. The voice was unmistakable. "Hey, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I need to say something. Please, don't hang up." It was Matthew. His voice was low, slower than usual, no sharpness, no cold logic, just a man trying to thread words together while falling apart. He said Jamie had left him, that he was alone, that he was sorry, I didn't realize what I was doing to you. I thought I was being honest, being progressive, giving us both freedom. But really, I was just taking from you over and over again. And you still stayed. I sat on the floor behind the counter, back against the shelves, clutching the phone, like it had heat. He went on, you were always the one who bent, who carried us. And I treated you like background noise. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just need you to know I finally see it. I see you, and I'm sorry. I didn't before. The message ended. I stared at the blinking light on my phone, unsure if I wanted to cry or laugh. It would have meant the world to me a year ago. Now I didn't know what it meant. Part of me wanted to erase it, pretend I never heard it. But another part, maybe the part that still remembered Sunday mornings with him, the smell of his t-shirt, the sound of his laugh, wanted something more dangerous, closure. The next day, I told Lynn I needed the afternoon off. I drove back to the city. The highway felt different this time. Less like an escape route, more like a confrontation. My hands were steady. My stomach wasn't. Matthew still lived in the same house. Our house. I almost turned around 3 times before I knocked. He opened the door slowly, like he wasn't sure I'd actually show up. His face was thinner, his eyes tired. He looked smaller. "Hey," he said. "Hey." We stood there awkwardly, like acquaintances at a high school reunion, who used to be something more. He gestured for me to come in. Everything was exactly the same. The same couch, the same photos on the wall. Even the coffee mug I used every morning sat on the kitchen counter. But the air had changed. It no longer felt like mine. We sat. We didn't touch. We didn't smile. I meant what I said, he began. In the message. I nodded. I know I was an idiot. You were selfish, I corrected softly, and I let you be. Silence. He didn't argue. I thought I needed more, he finally said. But all I did was chase things that made me feel new, not whole. You made me whole. And I broke that. I looked at him, really looked and saw not the man who hurt me, but the man who hurt himself too. And still, it didn't change the truth. I loved you so hard, I whispered. I shrank myself to fit what you needed. And when I finally walked away, it wasn't because I stopped loving you. It was because I started loving myself. His eyes welled up, but I didn't. Not because I was cold, but because I had already mourned this. I had already buried the marriage. I had cried the tears. I had screamed in the car, thrown pillows, whispered prayers into motel ceilings. I had done my grieving now. I was just done. I'm not here to get back together, I said gently. I didn't think you were. I'm here because I needed to see it with my own eyes, that I made the right choice. He nodded. You did. We talked a little longer about the house, the paperwork, logistics, adult things. And then I left. He stood in the doorway watching me go, just like I had once watched him fall for someone else. Only this time, it was my turn to walk away. Back in my new apartment, I felt lighter, not happier, Not relieved, just lighter, like I'd finally put down a suitcase I didn't realize I'd been dragging behind me. I curled up on my small couch, pulled out my journal, and wrote, "Closure doesn't come with an apology. It comes with choice, and I choose me." The next week, Carol from the women's group invited me on a weekend retreat. Just 6, women, a cabin in the woods, and no cell service. I hesitated at first. The old me would have made an excuse. But the new me packed a bag. That weekend changed everything. Around the fire, under a sky full of stars, we told our stories. Real ones. Not the polished Instagram-captioned versions, but the raw stuff. The kind that hurts coming out: divorce, betrayal, illness, loneliness, dreams deferred. And through it all, I realized something profound. We were all broken, and we were all healing. There was no shame in starting over. No shame in saying I didn't deserve that. No shame in saying I want more. That weekend, I made a promise to myself I wouldn't go back. Not just to Matthew, but to who I used to be. The woman who made herself small, who settled for less, who confused endurance with love. Life didn't magically get easier. After that, there were still bills, quiet nights that felt too long, moments when I reached for my phone, out of old habits. But there was also peace. And peace, I learned, was worth everything. The retreat gave me clarity, but clarity doesn't make life simple. You can have a clean heart and still walk into messes. You can be healing and still hurt. Growth isn't linear. It zigzags between strength and softness, between confidence and doubt. I knew this. Now I wrote it in my journal. I recited it like a prayer, but man, it's different when you feel it in your bones. 2 months after the retreat, I was sitting outside the bookstore on a warm Sunday morning, sipping coffee and watching the town come alive. Dogs on leashes, kids with sticky ice cream fingers, old couples holding hands like teenagers, the kind of scene that makes your chest ache a little, but in a sweet way. That's when I met him. He was browsing the outdoor shelf of used paperbacks. Tall, quiet, wearing a soft green sweater that made his eyes look like early spring. He picked up an old copy of The Alchemist, turned it over in his hands, then smiled when he saw me watching. "It's a cliché," he said, "but it's my favorite." I laughed. Sometimes clichés are just truths we hear too often. He smiled, and I swear, something shifted in the air between us. His name was Elliot. He had moved to town recently to be closer to his aging father, whom he was helping care for. He used to work in advertising, but left the city burnout behind. He spoke softly with intention, like every word mattered. There was no rush in him. We talked for 15 minutes, then 30. He came back the next day, bought a book he didn't need. Then again the next day, this time with coffee. It started slowly. Small things, shared lunches, long talks. A walk through the park after closing. I never felt pressured, never felt watched or judged. He didn't ask about Matthew. He didn't ask about my past. He just listened when I wanted to talk and laughed when I joked like I hadn't in years. And still, I panicked. Not in the dramatic movie-style way. Quiet panic. The kind that sneaks in when your life finally feels calm, and something or someone stirs the stillness. Was I ready? Was this fair to him? Was I just lonely? I found myself pulling away. One afternoon after a walk by the lake, Elliot reached for my hand and I let him. It felt nice. Familiar in a way I didn't expect. But later that night I cried. Not because he did anything wrong. Because it didn't feel wrong. And that scared the hell out of me. The next morning I left him a message. I need space. He didn't fight it. He said he understood. And that he'd be here if I ever wanted to talk. Then came the silence. I went back to my routine. Books. Yoga journaling, wine nights with the women's group. But the silence felt different this time. Not peaceful. Empty. Like I'd shut a door too soon. Carol noticed. Of course she did, over tea. She gave me that look. Half amusement, half wisdom, and said, "You're afraid it might actually work?" I laughed. "I'm not afraid." She raised an eyebrow. "Okay. I'm terrified." And I was. Because when you've been broken in a place as deep as your marriage, learning to trust someone new feels like walking barefoot on glass. Even kindness can feel like a trick. You flinch at tenderness. Brace for betrayal. You forget what it's like to be seen and not scrutinized. But Elliot wasn't Matthew. He didn't make me feel small. He didn't push past my boundaries. He didn't treat affection like a currency I had to earn. And yet I pushed him away, because something inside me still believed I didn't deserve simple. One evening I walked by the bookstore and saw him inside talking to Lynn. I ducked before he could see me, but Lynn, of course, spotted me. She texted me later that night. "He didn't ask about you. He just asked if the new poetry shelf had any Mary Oliver." I smiled despite myself. That was Elliot. Gentle curiosity. Never intrusion. That night I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I sat with my fear. Not fought it, not dismissed it, just sat with it. I lit a candle, curled up in a blanket, and opened my journal. And this time, I didn't write affirmations. I wrote truth. I am scared because I care. I am scared because I want this to be real. I am scared because it might not be. But I'm more scared of missing it entirely. That was the line that got me. I'm more scared of missing it entirely. So the next morning, I walked to the bookstore early. Elliot was there flipping through a gardening book. When he looked up, he smiled, but didn't move. "Hi," I said. "Hi. I'm sorry I disappeared." "It's okay." "No, it's not," I said. "I was afraid." "Still am," he nodded. "So am I, that was it. No dramatic declarations. No sweeping music. Just two people quietly choosing to try. We started seeing each other again. Not every day. No rushing. No pressure. Sometimes just a walk. Sometimes a shared book. Over coffee. Sometimes silence, but the kind that makes you feel held not alone. and slowly I let the walls down. Not all at once, but enough to breathe again. One night we sat under the stars behind the bookstore, a blanket wrapped around us, fireflies flickering in the distance. I told him the full story, the marriage, the rules, the betrayal, the motel, the bookstore, the journal. He didn't flinch. He didn't pity me. He just listened. When I finished, he took a deep breath and said, "You don't have to be anything other than exactly who you are right now. That's enough for me." And that those words healed something Matthew never could not, because Elliot was perfect, but because he saw me, not as a fixer-upper, not as a broken woman with a story, as a whole human, flawed, tender, trying. There was no grand epiphany, no fireworks, no sudden unraveling of all my pain healing. I've learned is quiet. Sometimes it's just breathing easier while doing the dishes, or waking up and realizing your chest doesn't feel heavy anymore. That was how it started, this new life of mine, with peace. Not joy, not yet, but peace, and peace after everything felt radical. Elliot and I didn't label what we were. We didn't make promises. We just kept showing up softly, consistently, without demands. Some days we walked in silence. Other days we laughed until our stomachs ached. It was steady, and that steadiness after the chaos I came from felt like magic, but the truth is, I still had things to face. One afternoon, while cleaning out my tiny apartment closet, I found a cardboard box I had tucked away the day I moved in. I hadn't touched it since inside were remnants of a former life. Wedding photos, love notes, a pair of cufflinks I gave Matthew on our 2nd anniversary, a handwritten recipe from his mom, ticket stubs, from a concert we never talked about but always remembered. I sat there, surrounded by memories, and for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to destroy them. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I smiled, because it happened. All of it. The good, the bad, the heartbreaking. And pretending it didn't would be erasing parts of myself I had earned. I picked up a photo of us from our honeymoon, standing on a cliff in Big Sur, wind in our hair, eyes squinting against the sun. We looked so happy, and we were back then. I placed the photo back in the box, closed the lid gently, and whispered, "Thank you, but I don't live here anymore." I donated the wedding dress to a local community theater, gave away the extra dishes, kept one coffee mug, the one I still used every morning, not because it reminded me of him, but because it reminded me of who I had been and how far I'd come. That weekend I joined a writing circle. I wasn't a writer, not professionally, but I had stories. So many of them, and for the first time, I wanted to tell them, not just to heal myself, but maybe to help someone else feel less alone. At our first session, the prompt was simple. A time you surprised yourself, and I wrote fast freely, like the words had been waiting for me. I wrote about the night I walked away from a marriage that had stopped being a partnership, about the quiet motel room, about Elliot's green sweater, about sitting across from Matthew and realizing I didn't hate him. I just couldn't carry him anymore. I read it aloud. When I finished, the room was quiet. Then someone whispered, "God." I needed to hear that. And just like that, something inside me cracked open again, but this time in the best possible way. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was reaching. Living. Giving months passed. The seasons changed. The leaves turned golden, then bare, then green again. And so did I. My hair got longer. My laugh got louder. I started dancing again just in my kitchen, barefoot while making pasta. I went on a road trip to the coast. I kissed Elliot in the rain. I forgave myself for not leaving sooner. I forgave myself for staying as long as I did. And then one day I got an email. It was from Matthew. It was short. "I'm getting married. Her name's Talia. She's kind different. I just wanted to say thank you for teaching me what love actually requires. I hope you're happy. Truly." I stared at the screen for a long time, and then I smiled. It didn't hurt, not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without bleeding. I replied, "I'm happy too. Take care." That was it. No bitterness, no hidden meanings, just closure. That evening I sat with Elliot on a park bench overlooking the lake. The sky was cotton candy pink, and ducks waddled by our feet. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. He reached for my hand, and I let him, without flinching, without fear. "I think I want to write a book," I said suddenly. He smiled. "You already have the story. You just have to tell it." I leaned against his shoulder, breathing in the scent of lavender and wood smoke. And for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. I felt home, but a new kind of home. The kind you build with your own hands, with walls made of truth, and windows that let the light in. Even when it rains, sometimes I still get quiet at night. The past visits like a familiar ghost, knocking softly. But now I know how to sit with it, thank it, and send it on its way. I'm not who I was, and I'm not finished becoming who I'll be. But I'm here, whole alive, and finally free. If you're listening to this and wondering if it's too late to start over, it's not. You are not too broken. You are not too much. You are not behind. You're right on time, just like I was.